The first things you have to do once you've opened Scratch is to download some Asteroid graphics from the web. Once you've done that, if you're a little lazy like me, one quick way of importing graphics rather than going to the costume and importing it that way is to have your sprite selected and then to drag it onto the actual screen. Now by doing that, if I now go to costumes, you'll see that it has loaded that costume into the computer. Now, one of the first things you'll probably notice is that you can't really see the costume. That's because Asteroids is in space, so you're going to need a black background. So if I go over to my stage and edit that, I'm going to want that completely black. So that's black is already selected. It's very similar to paint. Let's use the bucket tool. Click on that. Click OK. So now I've got a ship in the center of my screen. Now the next thing I'm going to need to do is add some control to that. So if I go to control, now one of the things that I would actually add at this point is you'll notice at the moment I can't seem to get any motion. That's because I've got the stage selected. I do need to make sure the sprite is selected to have all of the things that controls the motions. Okay, so let's get the ship to turn. So you've done this in earlier videos. If you get a control, perhaps the left arrow, and I'm going to get the ship to rotate to the left, so that's a motion. So turn 15 degrees. That's to go left, so my left key now works. I can turn left, and to get the right key, well, you can probably do this without being told. Right arrow, and I'm going to do a motion of turning right. So there I have it. There's my ship being able to turn. Now the ship is quite big. If you want to, this is really personal taste, what you could do is you can use the shrink either this way, maybe shrink it at just a fraction, or if you prefer a much bigger ship, then that's fine, you can just leave it as it is, or of course you can edit the costume and shrink it that way. The other thing I'll also just point out before I move on is you'll notice that as I turn here, there's this blue line. And you'll notice that's the actual direction of the ship. So if I move forward, that's the direction it's going to go. Next thing we need to do is to get it to actually fire something. So what we're going to do is we're going to need a new sprite. Now, I've not given you any sprites to choose from, so we're going to create one for here. So I'm going to paint a new sprite. And I'm going to have a white little bullet. It's obviously going to have to be white because I'm going to have a black background. So somewhere in the center, I'm just going to click. You might just about see it. Just in case it's not actually perfectly in the center, you may click on Set Costume Center. In actual fact, it is in the center, so that's fine. But I could now click and find the center of that. If I now click OK, you'll notice that there's a bullet in the center of the screen. So which I can of course just pick up and just move that across here. Now the first thing I want to do is when I hit the spacebar, I want it to shoot out of the front of this ship just like that. So let's think about how I'm going to do that. I'm going to have to go to Control. So I want to have it so when the spacebar is pushed, this is going to happen. Now the first thing I'm going to want to do is get it to go to the actual ship itself. So the ship is sprite 1. So you'll notice that when I now push the spacebar, it does go to the ship. Let's just prove that. Move it away. Hit the spacebar. It goes back to the center. Now I want it to fire out of the ship. However, I don't want which direction is it going to shoot? Well, it needs to be facing the same direction as the ship. So let's have a think how I'm going to do that. Well, I'm going to have to point it in the direction. Well, I have not got many options here. That's not necessarily the ship's direction. So let's have a quick look at sensing. I think because there might be something in there. Oh, hang on. What's this one? I've got exposition of sprite 1. Still not useful, but you'll notice that I've got a few different things to choose from. Now one of the things is direction. So here it's the direction of sprite 1. So if I pick that up and drag it in here, which is quite unusual, but you'll notice that this instruction is to get it to point in the direction of sprite 1. So if I now drag that Now if I hit space, it's not going to make any difference. You're not going to notice really anything, but it should actually be pointing in the same direction as the ship. Now what I want to do now is to get it to fire. So that sounds, well, first of all, let's have a control. How far am I going to want this to go? Well, if I get it to repeat 10 times, so whatever I put in here is going to happen, this instruction is going to happen 10 times, because after all, I don't want it to happen forever, just a number of times. If I go to motion, get it to move 10 steps, click on there. So now when I push the space bar, it should go to sprite 1, point in the same direction, and then it should move forward, and it should repeat this 10 times, which it's doing. That's quite nice. Okay, it's not really far enough. If I now turn, the bullet is coming out. So there's two things that are a problem here. I think first of all, it's not going far enough, so let's sort that out. So rather than repeat 10 times, let's try repeat 20 times. Almost, but if I try to fire in the corner, still doesn't reach the corner. So maybe let's try 30 times. That's better. I think I like that. That's fine. Okay. So the other thing is that I can sometimes still see the bullet. So what I want it to do is to have maybe disappear or hide. So I go to looks. I can get it to hide at the end. So when I fire, it hides. Of course, problem here is I've got to tell it to actually show every time. So let me show it every time I hit space, so it shows, because after all it's hidden now at the end. So now I get it to, so I revolve around, I can get it to fire, which is quite nice. So that gives me a nice firing thing. Actually, the one thing I'm not, maybe I'm a bit of a perfectionist here, but you notice how when I fire, it's coming out of the center of the ship rather than the point. So maybe what I could do is try to think about, well, here I'm moving 10 times. Let's be cheeky and get it to move forward 10 times. In fact, let's get it to move forward before I show it. So it's going to be a little bit fiddly. Let's try this, breaking it up. So let's put the show there. So here, it's going to go sprite 1. It's going to face the direction. It's then going to move 10 steps forward, and then it will show. So now if I hit spacebar, you'll notice how it gives it a bit more of an illusion that it's coming out the front of the ship. I'm going to need something to fire at. It's not going to be much fun just firing a ship into space. So what am I going to do now? Well, let's have some asteroids floating about now. Earlier we had a few, and I think I'm going to have another new sprite on this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a new sprite from File, and then you're going to need to find where you've stored your graphics that you've downloaded and you've unzipped. Now I'm going to start with, I think, Asteroid 1, which I believe is the biggest one. So I'm going to click OK on this one. So now I've got this rather large asteroid, which is not easy to pick up, because you have to pick it up from touching the graphic itself, as I say, which is not easy. Anyway, last time. Oh, yeah, so I can move that about. Basically what I want it to do is I want it to float across the screen. That's what I want it to do. So I'm on sprite 3. Now control, let's have it so that when the green flag is clicked, I'm going to get it to do something forever. And what am I going to get it to do? Well, let's get it to move 10 steps forward. Actually 10 steps is going to be quite quick, so let's try that to 1. Now when I hit the green flag, you should notice that it's nice and slow. It's moving across the screen, and the idea is that my ship, what I want it to do is obviously fire at it, and then later, if it gets hit by it, destroy. Now, problem here, it just went to the right. But when it gets to the end, what I really want it to do is, rather than just sticking there, I want it to appear on the other side of the screen. So how am I going to do that? Well, that's going to be an interesting thought. What I want it to do, if you think of maths, x and y, across is x, up and down is y. So the question is, what is x? Well, I'm assuming it's, as I move this across the screen, you can see it down here. X is 100, 200. Well, what is it exactly? Well, I don't really know. So what I'm going to do, in fact, if I go to motion, I can show the x and the y position of these. I can always untick them and hide them. But you'll notice if I now hit stop, what is the x position when it goes to here? That's sort of 280. Let's push the green flag. When does it actually stop? Sort of 289. So let's say 280. So I'm going to have a question now where if it goes over 280, then I want it to shoot across here. Now where is it over here? Let's hit stop. Now it's going to come out here, which is probably, I'm assuming, minus 280. So let's try that. So here I'm going to have an if. So in other words, if the x position is greater than 180, then I want it to go back over here to minus 180. So I need an operator. So if that's greater than 180, so the x position. Now what is the x position? Where am I going to find that? Oh, coincidentally. Now I can actually choose that, or I'm assuming I can just directly put that because I'm actually on sprite 3 anyway. So if the x position is greater than 180, what do I want it to do? Well, I want it to set x to, I think it was minus 180. So let's try that. Let's click that into place. And I'm going to need to put that inside the forever loop. Let's try that there. Hit the green flag. Now I'm hoping, yes, it did. When it gets to the end, it shoots back across. Although it shoots a bit early, maybe let's try increasing that. Let's just stop it. Okay, I want it to go when it gets there. So 180 is actually not the right number. That's when I think it just goes to the edge. So when it just starts going off, it's 180. So I think what I want to do is it's about there. So it's probably maybe 280 actually. Let's try that. 280. And I'm assuming that to make it, whoops, 280. So hit the green flag. So it's going off. That's much better. Otherwise, I think it was just almost touching the edge and then disappearing to the other side. Now, of course, what I'd need to do now is I would need to do this so that if it's going back in the other direction, that it would go off there. But one of the things I think I'm going to need to do is to get it to move backwards now. So let's just hit stop there. So on here I've got it moving one step forward. Well, I'm going to need to get it to, I think, change direction. So what direction am I going to get it to go? After all, I don't really want it to always go to the right. That's a bit predictable. So there's 90 degrees here. So over here, green flag is still going. So let's have it going left. So now on a green flag, it now goes back the opposite way. So, but again, it's going to get to the end and stick. So what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to be rather lazy here. Just stop it, and I'm going to duplicate. You see, I'm right-clicking over this. Now I could get my if and my operator and my motion and all those things, but I'm lazy, so I'm going to just right-click over here and say duplicate. I'll try that again. Duplicate that bit. So that's going to save me a lot of time. Well, maybe not. Let's get rid of that. Unfortunately, actually, I've got a different operator. Okay, maybe not saving me a great deal of time because it needs to be less than. So let's move this out, but still maybe a little bit of time. So if x position is less than minus 280, let's get rid of that. You can pick it up and move it onto this panel and it disappear. And this time I'm going to set the X to positive 280. So the idea is that when it comes to the left, X becomes minus 18. As soon as it does, it flips to 280 and shoots it across the screen. So let's put that in there. Let's try that again. Green flag. Waity. Long time. Come on. And when it gets to the end, shoots to the other side. Perfect. Okay, so I've done the X direction. I'm going to need to repeat with the Y direction as well. Save a little bit of time. I've done exactly the same, but this time the asteroid I've checked to see it going up and then making sure that it comes out from the bottom, and then of course the reverse is true. Now I've just put these here rather quickly, and you may want to pause the video and recreate these. But basically, what you'll need to do is you'll need to make sure that the Y position is greater than 229. It switches and sets the Y to minus 230, and of course, then when it goes down the screen, you want the Y position to be less than minus 229. So then you can then set it to 230 so it comes up at the top of the screen. And of course, once you've created those, you've paused this video, you've got those, you then need to drop those into place. Oops. Like so, and that should now give you the ability that when it goes up and down, it does that. So let's change that to up, green flag. It should now go to the top, and it should then come from underneath. So I've just to save you listening to me drone on, you can do that. Now there's one other thing that you do want to do, and that of course is not just have it so that you have to set the direction, but you want it to come up with some form of random number. And coincidentally, you'll see a random number here. In fact, if I drop that into there, well, what angle do you want it to have? Well, the complete turn is 360 degrees, so let's go from 0 to 360, or 360. So now, when I click the green flag, it should, in fact, click it a couple of times, you'll notice it's not just going up and down, but it's actually going up at maybe an unusual angle. But that should hopefully complete that to make it look a little bit more attractive. What to do is to destroy the asteroid by firing at it, but the original game had it so that when you fired an asteroid, it often broke into pieces, but it certainly got smaller before it was a final tiny little piece which you shot and then it disappeared. So that's what we're going to try to repeat. Now, of course, to do this, I'm going to need to have a number of different costumes for my asteroid. And earlier, you would have downloaded some graphics. I've got Asteroid 1, Asteroid 2, and Asteroid 3. I'm going to just pull those in. Asteroid 2, Asteroid 3, and you may have noticed now that when I switch to Asteroid 1, then Asteroid 2, and Asteroid 3, they are going to get smaller. So that's what I want, but I also want it to have it so that now when I do fire, it detects that it's been hit. Now, to make this seem a little simpler, rather than burying it in here, what I'm going to create another one, because you can do this, which does make it easier to build. But if I now do a repeat forever, so I'll just do a forever loop. So now let's get it to detect. So if it's hit, okay, in other words, saying if it's touching the bullet, which is sprite 2, what do I want it to do? Well, I actually want it to switch to the next costume. So now, when I click on the green flag, of course, the funny thing is that the thing starts with something small, so I do need to get it to switch. Just hit stop. Switch to the very first costume before it actually begins. So it's going to start with a bigger asteroid. So now when I shoot it, it switches to the smaller one. Switch it again. Oh, but of course, if I keep doing that, when it gets to the smaller one, it then goes back to the bigger one. So I do need to get it that once it's completed it and it's gone to costume whatever the last one is, which is Asteroids, which is number 3, I do need to get it to disappear. Now, if I go to looks and I get it to show costume, you'll notice that it shows Sprite 3 costume there. So now when I hit green flag, you'll see that it's costume 1. When I shoot it, it then becomes costume 2, and then in theory, when I shoot it again, it would go to 3, but it should then disappear. So, how am I going to get that to happen? Well, I need another question. Lots of questions here. So if, let's put it here, so if it's costume 3, when it's being hit, if it hits again, it's costume 3, then I do need it to basically stop. So, let's get that to go. So let's say if I need an operator. So if the costume is what? If the costume is, let's put that in now. So if the costume is, well, it's the number here. So if it's costume 3, oops, that's moved to the wrong one. That should be just outside this loop. I want it to hide. But of course, as soon as I put a hide in, then I do need to put a show every time I hit the green flag. Otherwise, it'll just disappear forever. So now when I hit the green flag, I should have it. So it's costume 1, fire once. It's now costume 2, fire again. Went to costume 3, went pretty quickly. Just test it one more time. So fire. It's now costume 3, and not sure where it's gone. Maybe I need to be a bit more careful about those numbers. Oops, let's give me some type 1, and then disappear completely. So it has gone back to costume 1, but you can't then see it. Now to finally tidy it up, and you'll notice that this here, it doesn't really fit in. Well, you can switch between a small game and this, and now I can switch back. The only problem is you can't really see it. But bear in mind, this is a little tip that you could have. Okay, so that's basically it, except that maybe we should tidy these up. So let's untick that, and then of course I've got sprite. It's sprite 3. It's the Y position, so that's going to be on the motion. So I can just untick those just to tidy it up. So now when I play, and I fire it, then of course it's a little bit better. Oh, the actually other thing I was just thinking of, you're using the arrow keys, of course. What you could do is, if you're right-handed, then you may actually want, rather than having a left and right arrow, you might switch this to Z and X, and then have the spacebar to fire. That might give you a bit more gameplay. Now for the final easy bit. One asteroid is not great fun, so let's create a few more. Of course, the easy thing to do is just to right-click and duplicate. And now when I hit the green flag, I will actually have 2 asteroids on the screen, which I can then obviously fire at and destroy them all. Of course, if that's not enough, why not duplicate another one? In fact, duplicate another one if you really want it. So now I've got loads of asteroids coming around, ready to hit me, which makes it a little bit more fun. Okay, so how many can you actually contend with? So that's quite a quick thing to do to make it a bit more gameplay.